Asuna walked through the quiet streets, feeling like she was on a mission. The local pointed her in the right direction. You know, there are a lot of kids hanging out at the church by the river in Sector E7. You should check it out. Asuna was grateful for the tip and bowed to say thanks. She was surprised that the person had actually given her some helpful info. Feeling braver, Asuna asked another question. What's going on here? What are you doing, and why is the city so empty? The guy made a face, but he seemed happy to share what was going on. Let's just say it's a company secret, he said with a hint of mystery. Hey, since you're not from around here, why not try something new? He said with a grin. Check out that high branch up there. Asuna looked up and saw a big tree covered in amazing autumn leaves. But if she looked really closely, she could spot tiny golden fruits hiding among the leaves. The trees in town are super special, he explained. They're made to last forever, so even if you climb all the way up, you won't be able to pick any of the fruit, or even a single leaf. They're totally untouchable. Imagine walking through a magical garden where juicy fruits hang from trees. Sometimes one of those yummy fruits falls to the ground. If you're lucky enough to grab it before it starts to rot, you can sell it to the non-player characters or NPCs for short, and get a pretty good price. Plus it tastes amazing. Asuna's eyes lit up with excitement. Ooh, she said. She was super into cooking and had even mastered her cooking skill. So whenever food ingredients came up in conversation, she got really interested. Hey, how much do they pay for doing this job? Asuna asked. The guy leaned in close and whispered. Promise not to tell anyone. It's only 5 col. Asuna's jaw dropped. She was shocked by how little it was, especially since watching the tree all day was a big responsibility. Wait, that's it, she said. I don't think it's worth it. I mean, you can find a worm in the woods and sell it for 30 col. The guy's eyes went super wide, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Asuna's friends stared at her like she was crazy. You can't be serious. If I go out there and fight monsters, I could get killed. Asuna didn't say a word. She knew he was right, fighting monsters was super dangerous. But to her it seemed like he was saying something ridiculous. Like never walk on the sidewalk because you might get hit by a car. It just didn't make sense to her. In her mind, some risks were worth taking. And this was one of them. Let's get real, fear can totally take over your life. Asuna wondered if she was just too used to the dangers of SAO Sword Art Online to be scared, or if this guy was just really paranoid about dying in the game. She couldn't quite figure it out. Maybe there wasn't a right or wrong answer here, but from what she could tell, most people in the town of beginnings probably agreed with him. The guy just kept on talking, totally clueless about the thoughts racing through Asuna's mind. Hey, what was that other question you had? Someone asked, and where is everyone? This town is pretty empty. But then it clicked, more just chilling in their hotel rooms. You see, during the day you might run into some not so friendly visitors. The army's tax collectors. One person spoke up. Taxes. What are those? Another person explained. It's like a robbery, but with a fancy name. Be careful, they don't mess around, boss, especially with outsiders. Whoa, one's going to drop, someone exclaimed. Suddenly the talking stopped. A guy clammed up and started concentrating really hard. Asuna bowed to thank him, but then she realized something weird. Kirito hadn't said a single word the whole time. She turned around to see what was up with him, and her eyes widened in surprise. Kirito's eyes were fixed intently on a yellow fruit. His eyebrows scrunched up like he was getting ready for a fight. Asuna's friend was about to grab some fruit that was hanging from a tree. But just as he was reaching for it, Asuna shouted, "Stop." Her friend looked up at her with big eyes and said, But I'm curious." Asuna didn't let him get away with it. She grabbed the back of his shirt and pulled him away from the tree. He complained loudly, but they look so tasty." Asuna wasn't having it. She gently pulled on his ear to make him look away from the fruit. "Focus," she said firmly. "We need to find Sector E7. Where is it?" "Hey, I heard there are some young players chillin' at the church," Kirito said with a grin. "Want to go check it out?" Asuna raised an eyebrow and replied, "Alright." She scooped up Yuku, who was now fast asleep, and fell into step beside Kirito as he walked away, studying his map. Luckily, Asuna's super strength in the game made carrying Yuku a breeze, like holding a soft fluffy pillow. Even though Yuku was about the size of a 10-year-old. Asuna didn't break a sweat. For over 10 minutes they strolled down the empty streets, heading southeast until they arrived at a beautiful open garden area. The cold wind of early winter blew through the colorful trees, making them creak and groan. It sounded like they were singing a sad song. Asuna and her friends studied their map. "This is supposed to be E7, her friend said, "but where's the church we're looking for?" Asuna looked up and pointed to a tall tower on the other side of the trees. "Is that it?" she asked. On top of the church's blue-gray roof, a shiny metal symbol caught their eye. It was an egg, made from a circle and a cross, and it sparkled in the cold winter air. Imagine walking into a virtual town in the game Sword Art Online. You'd probably find a church because every town had one, and these churches were really special. Inside you could find an altar that offered some amazing benefits. For example, if a monster put a curse on you, the altar could lift it, or it could make your weapon super powerful against undead creatures like zombies and skeletons. What made churches even cooler was that magic was rare in Sword Art Online, so these places felt really mysterious and spooky, like something out of a fantasy novel. Imagine you're on a big adventure and you need a place to stay. Some churches were like hotels. If you gave them enough offerings, they'd let you use a room. Asuna caught up to Kirito as he was heading towards one of these churches. "Hey, wait up," she said. Kirito turned around, wondering what was wrong. "What's going on?" he asked. Asuna looked unsure. "I just want to make sure. If we find Yui's guardian here, are we gonna leave her behind?" Kirito's eyes filled with worry as he thought about it. His black eyes got all soft and concerned. He walked up and gave Asuna and Yui, who was still sleeping, a big hug. "I don't want to say goodbye to her either," he said. "When Yui was with us, our little house in the woods felt like a real home. I loved having her around. It made everything feel cozy and normal. But here's the thing, we'll get to see her again soon. I'm sure Yui will come see us again, once she gets her memory back," someone said. Asuna nodded, but didn't seem too sure. She gently rubbed her cheek against Yui's, then took a deep breath to prepare herself for what was coming next. The church they were about to visit was pretty small compared to the huge city around it. It had only 2 floors and one tall tower, called a steeple, that reached up towards the sky. Imagine walking into a town called Beginnings, where churches are as common as houses. One of these churches was super close to the teleport square, and it was huge. It was almost as big as a small castle. Asuna grabbed one of the large wooden doors and swung it open with ease. Since it was a public place, the door wasn't locked. Stepping inside, she found herself in a quiet, dimly lit space. The only light came from candles flickering on the altar up ahead, casting a weak glow on the stone floor. Asuna peeked inside and saw that the room was empty, or so it seemed. She leaned in and shouted, "Hello, is anyone here?" Her voice bounced off the walls, but there was only silence. "I think we're alone," she said. But Kirito wasn't so sure. He spoke in a quiet tone. "Actually, I think there are people hiding from us. I can sense 3 people in the room to our right, 4 in the room to our left, and a couple more upstairs." Asuna's eyes widened in surprise. "Wow, how did you know that?" she asked. Kirito explained, "My search skill is pretty high. Once you get it up to around 90-80, you can detect people even when they're behind walls." "Trust me, it's worth it," one person said, but the other wasn't convinced. "Are you kidding? That would drive me nuts." They changed the subject quickly. "What do you think they're hiding from?" Meanwhile, Asuna slipped into the church, her eyes scanning the room. It was super quiet, but she felt like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what she'd do next. She took a deep breath and called out, "Hello, is anyone here? We're looking for someone." Her voice echoed off the walls, but there was no answer. The door on the right creaked open just a little and a soft voice whispered out, "You're not from the army, are you?" A guy replied, "Nope, we came from a higher floor." Asuna and Kirito didn't look like they were ready for battle. They weren't even carrying their swords, and they definitely weren't wearing the heavy armor that army members always wore. It was pretty obvious they weren't with the army. Slowly but surely, the door swung open all the way. A girl with short, dark blue hair stepped out. She had big black glasses perched on her nose, and her green eyes looked really scared. She seemed hesitant to come out, like she was worried about what might happen next. Asuna wore a simple navy dress, but what caught everyone's attention was the tiny dagger she held in her hand. It was still covered, but it looked like it could come out quickly if needed. A worried woman looked at Asuna and asked, "You're not here to collect taxes for the army, are you?" Asuna smiled kindly to put the woman at ease. "No, that's not us," she said with a nod. "We actually came from a place above, and we're looking for someone. We don't work for the army." The woman's eyes widened in surprise. "From above," she repeated, clearly curious about what Asuna meant. "Are you guys real heroes?" a high-pitched voice asked from behind the woman. The door burst open and a bunch of people ran out. Another door to the left of the altar swung open, and even more people poured out. Asuna and Kirito were shocked as they watched a group of kids, who looked like they were just boys and girls, rush to stand on either side of the woman with glasses. They all lined up, eager to see what would happen next. Imagine walking into a new place, and being surrounded by a bunch of curious kids. They looked like they were around 12 to 14 years old, and their eyes were wide with excitement, as they stared at us. But one woman, who seemed to be in her early 20s, was not happy about the situation. "I told you to stay hidden," she exclaimed, trying to shoo the kids away. However, they didn't listen to her. They just kept on staring. One boy in particular, with cool spiky hair, looked really disappointed. "What's the deal?" he asked, clearly not impressed with us. "Wait a minute, you're not even carrying a sword," one of the kids exclaimed. "Are you really from the world above? Everyone from up there has a sword, right?" The kid turned to Kirito, who looked a bit unsure of himself. I do have a sword," Kirito said slowly, but before he could explain further, the kid's eyes widened with excitement. Show us your sword," they Kiritosed. Just then their mom jumped in, looking really embarrassed. "I'm so sorry about this," she said, bowing low. They're not used to meeting new people. Asuna quickly tried to reassure her that everything was okay. "Hey, it's okay. I know you've got some cool stuff hidden away, Kirito," someone said with a grin. "Why don't you show us what you've got?" Kirito nodded and his fingers flew across his screen. Suddenly about 10 awesome weapons appeared one by one, stacking up on the bench next to him. These were all the sweet treasures he had collected from beating monsters, but hadn't gotten around to selling yet. Kirito pulled out all the extra goodies from his inventory except for the things he was already using. Then he invited the excited kids to come check it out. They gathered around, their eyes wide with excitement, ready to see what Kirito had to show them. Imagine walking into a room where kids are grabbing swords in masses like they're toys. They were so excited, checking out how heavy they were and thinking they were totally awesome. It was a little scary to watch, but don't worry, they were in a safe area where they couldn't get hurt by the sharp blades. A woman looked on, seeming really worried at first. "I'm really sorry about this," she said. But as she saw how much fun the kids were having, a big smile spread across her face. "Follow me, please," she said, waving them to come along. "Let's grab a cup of tea," the kind woman said with a smile. She welcomed Asuna and Kirito into a cozy little room beside the chapel. As they sat down, she handed each of them a steaming hot cup of tea that smelled amazing. "Now tell me, you're looking for someone, right?" she asked, settling into her chair across from them. Asuna spoke up. "Yeah, that's right. I'm Asuna and this is my friend Kirito." The woman's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh dear, I'm so sorry. I forgot to introduce myself," she said, looking a bit embarrassed. Asuna smiled and said, "I'm Asuna, and this is my friend Yui." She gently stroked Yui's hair, as the little girl slept in her lap. "We met Yui on the 22nd floor, but she was all alone, and couldn't remember anything about herself." Sasha's big green eyes widened behind her glasses. "Oh no, that's so sad," Asuna explained. "Yui didn't have any special gear or belongings with her, just the clothes she was wearing. We thought it would be tough for her to survive on her own in a higher floor. So we came to the town of beginnings to see if we could find her family, or someone who knows her." Sasha listened carefully, her hands wrapped around her teacup. Asuna continued, "We heard that this church was home to lots of kids around Yui's age, so we hoped we might find some clues here." Sasha nodded thoughtfully, and said, "Actually, there are about 20 kids living in this church. They're all different ages, from elementary school to middle school." Here's a fun and engaging version of the text. It seems like almost every kid in town is playing the game right now. As soon as it started, something weird happened. Most kids around our age totally freaked out. Sasha said, her voice shaking but determined. They had some serious mental issues because of it. Only a few brave ones tried to face their fears and leave the town to beat the game. But they were definitely the exceptions. Asuna knew exactly what Sasha was talking about. She had gone through it herself when she was in 8th grade. Just like these kids. Imagine being stuck in a small room all alone for days. It's enough to drive anyone crazy. She had been really close to losing it when she was cooped up in her in-room. But now, she understood why some kids were feeling so overwhelmed. They were at an age where they still wanted their parents to keep them safe, but instead they were being told they might be trapped and never get to go back to their normal lives. Imagine being so upset that you feel like giving up. That's what happened to some kids who played this game. They became so hopeless that they stopped talking to their friends and family. Sasha's face scrunched up in disgust. At first I was really into the game, she said. I spent the first month playing outside, trying to get stronger to beat it. But then something weird happened. I saw one of these kids just standing on a street corner in town, and it was really sad. I just had to help him out. I couldn't leave him all alone, so I brought him back to my little room at the inn where I was staying. But that's when something crazy happened. I started thinking about all the other kids out there who might be in the same tough spot. Next thing I knew, I was on a mission. I ran all around the city, searching high and low for any kid who needed a helping hand. Here's what happened next. I was doing just this, meeting people like you who are putting it all on the line for our freedom. And to be honest, it made me feel pretty bad about giving up on our mission. No way, that's not true, Asuna said, shaking her head. She wanted to say more, but the words got stuck in her throat. Luckily, Kirito jumped in to finish what she was trying to say. Sasha, you're a hero in your own way. You're being super brave, even more than I am. Sasha smiled and said, thanks, but I'm not doing it, because I feel like I have to. It's actually really cool living with the kids. She looked over at Yushi, who was fast asleep, and her expression turned worried. For the past 2 years, Sasha and her friends had been on a mission. Every day they would pick one part of the city and search every single building for kids who needed help. They were like a team of superheroes, working together to make sure no child was left behind. I'm pretty sure I would have noticed a girl that small, Sasha said with a shrug. Sorry to let you down, but I don't think she was living here. Asuna looked disappointed, but then she gave Yui a big squeeze. She took a deep breath and focused on Sasha again. Hey, I don't mean to be nosy, but how do you make enough money to get by every day? Sasha smiled and said, well, I'm not alone in this. Imagine having older friends who are like superheroes. They're strong enough to explore the fields outside of town without getting hurt. They help make sure everyone has food on the table. Even if it's not a feast, it's just enough to get by. Kirito thought this was really cool. That's awesome. He said, I mean, we heard that going into the wilderness to hunt monsters is like asking to get killed. But these older kids are brave enough to do it, and keep everyone safe. Sasha nodded in agreement. She knew how tough it was out there, but she also knew that these older kids were making a big difference. Most people left in the town of beginnings are really scared, she said, and I get it. There's a good reason to be afraid. Dying is a real possibility here. But let's look at the bright side, we're actually making more money than most players in this city. She made a good point. If we had to pay to rent these private rooms in the church every day, it would cost us about 100 call. That's way more than some fruit hunter could afford. But now they've targeted us, someone said, sounding worried. Who has? The person asked, but Sasha's expression turned serious and tough, her eyes narrowing into a fierce stare. Just as she was about to explain something, a commotion broke out. Miss Sasha, come quick. Someone yelled. The door burst open, and a bunch of kids rushed in. Hey, be respectful. Someone scolded. But one kid, a fiery red-haired boy, wasn't having it. His eyes were welling up with tears as he shouted. This is an emergency. Jin and the others have been caught by the army. Sasha jumped to her feet, taking charge right away. Where are they? She demanded. The red-haired boy took a deep breath before answering. They're in the empty lot behind the item shop in Sector E5. A group of about 10 soldiers had taken over the alleyway, trapping everyone inside. But one person managed to slip away, Kata. Just then, Sasha spoke up. I'm so sorry about this, she said to Asuna and Kirito, but I have to go help rescue some kids who are in trouble. Can we catch up later? As soon as she said that, a fiery redhead jumped in. We're coming with you, Miss Sasha, she exclaimed. The other kids quickly agreed, eager to join the adventure. Kirito was suddenly surrounded. The kid rushed over to him, begging for a favor. "Hey mister, can we please use your cool swords? If we show up with those, the bad guys will run away for sure." But before Kirito could even respond, Sasha jumped in. "No way, you kids need to stay right here and wait," she said firmly. Kirito had been quietly watching the whole scene, but now he raised his hand to calm everyone down. This guy was usually really quiet and kept to himself. But when things got serious, he suddenly became super present. The kids stopped chattering and listened up. "I know you're excited," he said calmly, "but those weapons are way too strong for you to handle. Don't worry, we've got a plan to rescue your friends." He smiled and nodded towards the woman standing next to him. "Asuna. She's actually amazingly powerful," he added. Asuna gave a quick nod, like she was saying, "Yeah, I've got this." She turned to Sasha and said, "Let us help you. The more people we have, the better it will be." Sasha smiled and bowed low. "Thanks. That's really nice of you," she said. She pushed her glasses back up her nose and exclaimed, "Time to go." Then Sasha dashed out of the church doors and started running fast. Her dagger bounced at her side as she sprinted away. Kirito and Asuna trailed behind, still holding tight to Yui. Asuna glanced back and saw a bunch of kids following them. But she didn't think Sasha would bother trying to keep them inside the church. They made their way through the trees into the E6 sector, then ducked down a narrow alley. Sasha took a detour to get them to their destination faster. They zoomed past shops and cut through backyards until they reached a narrow alley. But their path was blocked by a big group of players, at least 10 of them. They were all wearing gray, green and black gear, which meant they were part of the army team. Sasha darted into the alley and screeched to a stop just in front of them. The army players turned around, sneering at her. "Hey, look who's here." "The babysitter," one of them jeered. Sasha stood tall, her voice firm. "Give me back the kids," she demanded. One of the players snickered. "Who says we've taken them? You make it sound like we're kidnappers or something." "Don't worry, you'll get your stuff back. But first, we're going to teach you a thing or two about how the world works," one of the men sneered. His friend chimed in. "Yeah, people have to pay their taxes. It's their duty." The men burst out laughing, their high-pitched voices sending chills down Sasha's spine. Her fists were clenched so tightly, they started to shake. Sasha shouted over the men, "Jin Kane, Mina, are you guys okay?" A scared voice quickly responded, "Help, please, someone help us." Another voice pleaded, "Forget about the money. Just give it to them, please." But a boy's voice cried out, "We can't." One of the men couldn't help but giggle at the situation, his silly kee-hee echoing through the alleyway. "Oh, you're way behind on your taxes," one of the men sneered. "And this time it's going to cost you more than just cash." His buddy chimed in, a mean grin spreading across his face. "We want all your gear, armor, weapons, everything. Hand it over." Asuna's eyes widened as she figured out what was really going on. These so-called tax collectors were actually thugs who had cornered some kids in an alley. They were forcing them to give up everything they owned, even their clothes. The men were laughing and having a great time, but Asuna knew this was no joke.